Hello and welcome to our webinar today about GDPR compliant cookie and consent management. I want to thank everybody for joining us today here, and I hope that we can share some useful information with you that you can apply on your own website and for your own cookie and consent management later on. To start, I would like to present ourselves. I am joined here today by my colleague Lisa Hoffman. Lisa is Chief of Legal Operations with us at Pridatect, and she's a data privacy specialist and certified data protection officer by the German authority for that, TÜV, and she has been working with European clients throughout the last year, so she has a lot of experience. And then from my side, I'm Xenia Rohrkamp. I'm our Chief of Marketing and Sales Operations at Pridatect, and I'm joining today's webinar as marketing and UX expert, especially and particularly looking at the topic of how cookie banners can be used user-friendly and without shocking people when they're entering your website. So I would like to start to tell you as well that on the right-hand side of your panel, you can find a part which allows you to ask questions throughout the webinar. It's important. Please feel free to use that. We will go through the question at the end of the webinar and reply to everything that we can right away. If you have a question later on, or if you are seeing the demand version of the webinar, which will be available afterwards, please feel free to use our email address that you can find on the right side. Your email will, I'm sorry about that. Your email will be arriving with Lisa, and she will be responding to that afterwards. So to start with an introduction, cookie banner and privacy, which is the topic of today, I want to start maybe just very briefly explaining what a cookie banner is in case you are wondering. It's the cookie warning that appears on websites when a user first visits them, which indicates which cookies and which tracking is present and used on the website, and it gives the users the opportunity to decide. Do I want to consent into processing my data here, or do I choose to not consent into that and not have my data processed by the website? The EU has certain requirements for cookie banners, which we will be talking today. And there is an e-privacy directive, which requires prior informed consent from users of your website, while the GDPR also requires that you must document any consent that you are receiving. There has been a recent cookie judgment this year, which is very interesting, and we will look into that a bit more detail today. It was a judgment that was made by the German court and also the European Court of Justice, which says consent must be given, definitely. And in this webinar, we will look in more detail what this judgment entails, what was the case of Planet 49, and what that implies for you and how you need to basically adjust your cookie banner if you haven't yet on your website. Our agenda, just to quickly give you an overview of what we will be talking in detail today, is first looking into the topic of cookies and cookie banners in general, and then checking what does the GDPR and the e-privacy directive require you to do in terms of cookie banners. What is a legally sound cookie banner for you to implement on the website, and what does it need to contain? Then we will look a bit more closely at the Planet 49 case, and Lisa will run us through that with her legal understanding and explain us very well what it means, what was decided, what does that mean for you. Afterwards, we will look what a privacy compliant cookie banner has to entail and also how this is built up. And finally, I will talk a little bit about the topic of user friendliness. How can you combine both? How can you have a cookie banner that is legally sound but still user-friendly, and how can you optimize it for your website? To start off, I wanted to explain you a little bit what is a cookie anyway. We hear that term all the time, and I'm sure most of us are not actually sure what does a cookie do, why do we have it on the website. It has something to do with tracking, but in general, we're not quite sure what a cookie actually is. It's quite a technical topic, right? So to understand that, a cookie is a piece of data that is, that is being stored on your computer by a website that you are visiting. It's a text file which is sent by your internet browser that you're using to the relevant server each time you are visiting a website and revisiting a website. These cookies are functioning for various things, but usually they are remembering. They're remembering a previous visit, they're remembering the activity that you have done on the website, and this can be used to then individually adapt a website to the user and individually adapt different contents to your surfing habits. A cookie does not only store the data on the user's device, but also on the server of the site operator, and therefore is transmitting data from the user to the website operator. This is the reason why website operators must comply with data protection regulations, because they are receiving data from the users here when they are using cookies on their website. And here I want to hand over to Lisa, who will tell us a little bit more about the legal basis for the use of cookies.
Perfect. Yeah, now let's speak a little bit about the legal basis. Like Xenia mentioned before, cookies can contain information that identifies a website visitor, such as also an IP address, an email address, or a user ID. So Article 4 from the GDPR stipulates that online information about individuals can also be identified as personal data. So also an IP address is considered personal data and therefore has to be treated and processed also as such. So however technically necessary the cookies are, this does not allow the web that you can process it just without any consent. You have to make here a difference. So for the use of cookies that process personal data, a permission from Article 6 from the GDPR must be given. So there we have like some reasons why you can process this data in the Article 6, and you should look at this, of course, more closely. The operator of the website can either obtain the consent of the visitor or refer to the fulfillment of a contract or also legitimate interest. This is still a bit unclear what is considered legitimate interest here though, because is direct marketing legitimate interest for the survival of a company? Maybe yes. So there are some statements from different authorities, and they are saying that consent must be obtained in the use of tracking mechanisms that make the behavior of the affected persons on the internet more comprehensible, and in the creation of user profiles as well. So here there is a clear statement that you should definitely obtain the consent of the user. Before using analytical tools like such as Google Analytics, which like most of the websites are using, informed consent must be obtained in any case. And now we will speak later on a bit also about what is informed consent. It's not only consent, not only yes, no, but the consent must be informed. This means that, of course, the user must be informed about this. So only absolutely, because you know that some cookies on the websites, they are checked, you cannot uncheck them. And this is only for the absolutely necessary cookies. That means those without which the service could not otherwise be made available to you, to the user. And there, it's not required that you obtain the consent. But to be honest, these are only really, really very few cookies that allow that. So valid consent presupposes, of course, that the website visitor must actually have the choice to decide whether or not to allow those cookies. So I can see that in a lot of websites lately, as I'm working from a new computer, and I have to obtain like all the consent of the websites I'm visiting again now. That they just like, you can just press OK, and they have to give, I have to give the consent all over again, but it's not been done by many companies. I see it now a lot. I'm very shocked because of this ruling. I thought this ruling really maybe changed something, because now we have it clear, black and white on paper, how companies have to act in this case. So, but we will go back to consent later on. But first, look a bit at what Xenia also already mentioned before, the e-privacy directive.
Yeah, I will click further. Here you go, Lisa. Just very quickly here, we will also show practically later some illustrations that will show you basically the cases that Lisa already mentioned. And if you are having some fun with it, go to your browser, go to the incognito tab and surf some of the websites that you're visiting on a regular basis and just check them against what we're saying today. You will see some very, very interesting results there.
Absolutely. Speaking about the e-privacy directive, here we have to look now on how to classify this directive in relation with the GDPR, because we all know there are some different directives, and the GDPR is a framework regulation. So as an EU regulation, the GDPR is applicable to all the member states, but in Article 95 of the GDPR, it gives a clear priority to the e-privacy directive in appropriate cases, of course. So here it is also very important that the e-privacy directive shouldn't be confused with the e-privacy regulation. We hear both a lot, especially in the data security world. You hear it a lot, so we have to distinguish them. So the regulation was supposed to come into force the same day as the GDPR, so on May 25th in 2018. But due to some disagreements between the states, what they wanted, it has been postponed, and it's not expected to enter into force before, I would say, at least 2022 earliest. So we speak here still about the directive. But the regulation is really important because the regulation would then also regulate emails, messenger, and communication on websites much better, because the previous set of rules, as we said, was very early. The directive is of 2002. So it's like too old to have like all this technological development, because it was simply too fast. Think 18 years back, what we had then. And this regulation still should cover all of it. So in a few years, we have made like such a great progress in terms of technology, also in terms of online marketing. I think, Senja, no, I mean, I think 18 years back from now. And so in terms of that, everyone in the data protection world is really excited for this regulation finally entering into force. But we should go deeper on this topic in another webinar, I think, because this is a whole topic itself. But in Article 5, Paragraph 3, Sentence 1, as we state here, of the 2009 version of the e-privacy directive, because it was updated at least a little, this provides for active consent for access to and storage of, very important, terminal equipment information, with very, very few exceptions here. So this we listed here. So if a website operator requires consent to use cookies, the user must give actively their consent for it to be considered valid. And we mentioned this before, you cannot have an already marked checkbox, which is also the case of Planet 49 is about. So the consent must be given and it's invalid if the checkbox would be pre-checked. And even the activation of a button for the participation in a competition is not considered effective consent for the storage of cookies. This is really important. And also in such cases, the website would have to provide with information, among other things, the duration, and we speak later about this and go more into detail what we really need to provide here for the cookies, the duration of the cookies used, whether third parties can access the cookies, and so on. So therefore, we have an extra slide more along the way. So and now
about 49.
Exactly, because this is like kind of the case which led us to the webinar. I found this ruling very exciting. It was very recent, as you can see here, on the 28th of May 2020. I was then writing Senja like, oh my God, this is a very important decision. We should do a webinar about it, especially as it was a German ruling, very interesting for me, but also for our UK clients, for everyone, it's really interesting because it was, of course, of the European Court of Justice, the decision, so it applies really to everyone, and of course also to companies in the UK. So now
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Actually, I just wanted to mention first, Lisa and I did the webinar in German, and we were just really targeting the German market, and we got a lot of requests from our international clients to cover the topic as well of cookie use and how to implement cookie banners well. So we said, okay, we've done it in German already. We have both German backgrounds and look into that very, very intensively. So we said, okay, let's do it, and let's do it as well in English so that everybody can benefit from the content.
Absolutely, because I think everybody thinks it's a really confusing topic, and now with the new ruling, it's almost impossible if you're a small company to handle it yourself. But let's see what the ruling was. So the Planet 49 decision, which was driving into force behind the whole webinar, as we said, the European Court of Justice has decided that the user must actively consent to certain cookies. So like a keep surfing banner, what we already know, all of us have seen, I guess, with direct consent, for example, by just clicking OK, is not sufficient anymore. As I mentioned before, I've seen it a lot lately, and the pre-selected checkbox is not allowed anymore. And therefore, I was so shocked because now it was already in May, so it's like some time passed. Companies had time to adjust, but they just didn't. And so in the case of Planet 49, the question was whether the website that set the cookies on the visitors need the active consent of the visitors or not. So this meant a real consent, not just a you can continue surfing banner. More specifically, the question was whether the checkbox in such a cookie banner may be already clicked or not. So Planet 49 was warned by the Consumer Center of Germany because of the checkbox that had been already checked in advance. So the German Supreme Court, we call it BGH, just for later on, referred the case then to the European Court of Justice. So, and after this CJEU ruling in 2019, the German Supreme Court then ruled in the final instance, and the BGH decided on the 28th of May 2020, so in May, that this opt-out is to be interpreted in accordance with the directive in the sense of consent. So this means we need a clear consent. Pre-checked is not longer valid because we had like different rulings from different laws. We had a law in Germany that said normally it's allowed, even if it's pre-checked, the acceptance is okay, but this is no longer valid anymore. So you need to have the clear consent. And this decision now puts many companies into a lot of trouble. We will see in a moment that cookies are really difficult to set. And we have also noticed this on our own website, no, Xenia? I mean, it was a big trouble to be 100% compliant there. And what we can see here, like often very wrong, is that you can, for example, only agree but not refuse, for example, or that you have like the consenting much bigger in a brighter color and the decline like super small next to it, which is of course also not legal. And yeah, agree and disagree should really have the same size. Color difference should also be the same. Otherwise, there was only a banner like before. Do you remember the times when there was the banner like hereby I accept all the cookies and nothing more? So this.
Well, you say, do you remember the times? I would say, let's surf a little bit the internet. I'm seeing them all the time, unfortunately. Unfortunately, this is not a thing of the past. The thing that here needs to be considered is that a lot of website providers, a lot of platforms provide automatically the option to include cookie banners. These options weren't automatically updated because there was a ruling in Germany, and even though it passed the European Court of Justice, it's not necessarily something that becomes very loud in public. So not everybody is being aware that this ruling has been made. In the end, the law existed before, right? It's something that is not completely new, but it's new in terms of that it has been adopted, that there was a judgment made based on it, but not everybody has changed. It doesn't mean that suddenly all WordPress templates or all Shopify pages do have a valid cookie banner and the right technology in place to implement one. So I understand to a certain degree as well that there's just a lack of knowledge, but this lack of knowledge is very dangerous, no, in the end, since when it comes to data protection, every company has to inform themselves. They have to find either a good provider, a good partner, or somebody internal who takes care of the topic and who's aware what is right and what's wrong. In the end, nobody of us is implementing a cookie banner because we like to. It doesn't make the website prettier. It doesn't add any marketing value. In the end, it's really purely a legal requirement, and it's something that enables the user to choose, no? And that is important that it's being done correctly. So that's what we want to talk about today, no? So Lisa, also, I'm moving forward to the next slide so that you can explain a bit, what does a cookie banner really need to contain? What are the information that I, as a website owner, need to include in a cookie banner to make it legal?
Absolutely. So on this slide, we have once again made clear the difference between, as we can see here, informed consent in an informed manner on the left, and the information requirements from the articles 12 to 14 of the GDPR. These are two different things, and we need to distinguish them because a lot of people get confused by them. These are separate requirements, but you can see also, this is why we draw both of them, that there are of course a lot of overlaps. But you can also see that it's a bit more complex here on the left than on the right, because on the right you have like this list, you can check it off. It's like from one law, it's only from the GDPR, tick, 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 would be easy to fulfill them all. And on the other side, it's a bit like we have to look at different regulations where we can take it from, but it also requires a little bit less information. So here we have, like, for example, recital 42 of the GDPR names that you have to say the identity of the controller. So it would be you as a company, maybe, or the cookie where it comes from, and the processing purpose. Definitely you have to state, so why do you need this cookie? Do you need it for marketing purposes? I mean, you don't have to go 100% into detail, but marketing purposes, for example, statistics you can name. And then we have from the CJEU decision, Plan 49, you also have to name the function, the duration, so how long does this cookie last on the server, and the recipients, which is pretty tricky. So do you share the cookie? Do you share this information from the cookie with third parties? Then we have like the Supreme Court ruling. So for this particular case, this is really interesting because it's the same as the consent of the GDPR, that you have to state really a purpose. And of course, this purpose, if it changes, for example, if you want to use the information for something different, then you would have to get the consent again, because you have obtained the consent in this case only for this and this purpose. So this is very important here, that you also have to update it, and you have to name the categories of the product, and I think and the services in the advertising consent. And I think here it gets already really complicated. Like for a small business with a small website, to name all of these requirements, I find it honestly almost impossible. And then we have here, last but not least, the European Data Protection Board guidelines, which we can see are from June 2020, so they are also very recent. And they state that information of the cookie banner has to contain the identity again, then the purpose, the category of data, the revocation, recipients, and the transfer to third countries. I think this sums it up the best from the European Data Protection Board. It includes a bit everything, but I think it also shows just the complexity, what you need to name. And also the last point here is a bit worrying, I think, transfer to third countries, because we already had recently the Schrems decision. So we made a special webinar on this, and right now, after this ruling, all data transfers to the US with Google Analytics and so on would not be valid, would straightly not be valid. We wait on another decision here. Cookies are not excluded for that.
There's different ways to deal with that. So definitely, please feel free, if you're interested on that topic, to have a look at our webinar about the Privacy Shield decision, and contact us in case you have questions about that. We're happy to help. But basically what we want to do here, I know it's a very, very long list. It seems complex. It's a little bit daunting if you look at this. Number one, you don't need to take notes. We're sending out later the presentation as well via email to everybody who participated in the webinar, no worries. But also what I wanted to say, we give you, of course, a practical application of this example. So what we will do now in the next slide is that I'm going to show you how can a cookie banner look like, and how does this look in practice, because in the end, it's a lot of information, as Lisa mentioned already. It might seem very difficult for a small company to do. I can give you the tip that there is websites that help you determine which cookies you actually have actively on your website, that help you understand which information you need to include there and get the right information for each point that you need to state. So you can do some research there. And there are a few websites that can be helpful. Please feel free to reach out to us if you want to have some more practical guidelines on that. We're happy to share. But just here, I wanted to show to you how can a cookie banner that is GDPR compliant look like. And we have in this case a screenshot of our own website. here, as you can see. And you can see we are using a service by User-Centrics, no affiliation here. We are normal clients of User-Centrics and pay for the service, but it's one of the providers that we can recommend in terms of they are providing a good solution here, a GDPR compliance solution. And you can see that we have different levels for the cookie banner. In level 1, you're getting some very basic information about which data categories we are collecting with our cookies, what the very general purpose is, that we're utilizing a tracking technologies, that we're transferring to third parties, and you can see an approval and rejection mechanism. So you have the option to do both. You can accept cookies, you can plainly deny the use of cookies here and continue surfing the website without cookies being set. Excuse me. And you can also request more information, which will lead you to level 2, which I will show you now, where you can choose individual cookies. This is super, super important because it gives already on a very, very brief, quick overview the option to understand this website is utilizing cookies. Am I happy with that? Do I accept that? Would I rather serve the website without the use of cookies? Or do I want to understand better what kind of cookies are being used? So I do have all these options here. It's not only an accept button. It's not only an information that cookies are plainly being set, but it's a choice that actively the user can make on the website. Then we do have here the second layer. This is the one that opens once I'm picking more information. And here I do have different groupings of purposes of cookies that are being set. For example, here I do have the marketing cookies that are being set and also functional below, and the other categories, they're being described. Then I can see each individual cookie and tracking service that is being used by the website or can be used by the website if I accept that. I do have the recipients, I do have the data processing purpose, I do have the transfer. Like here we can see the Google Ads remarketing cookie is actually situated with Google Ireland, and this is going to be transferred to Ireland, which is still in Europe. That's very good. And I also have information about the storage duration, about approval and rejection options, which is also important. And I have the option to just say I reject everything. Nothing is pre-ticked here. If I just save and close this window, I have not willingly accepted cookies, but I can go through and say, okay, there are certain cookies that I'm willing to accept. Let's be very honest and let's be very frank here. If a user arrives at this stage, it's highly unlikely that he's actually going to make a choice out of the menu of the cookies that he's willingly going to accept. Probably the user is a bit more careful about the data that he's providing to a website and might just have a look at what the website would be doing and probably not accept the cookies. But also the percentage of users that go to this level is relatively low. It's an information that you have to give as website provider. It's important that it is there for those users who do have this additional concern, but it's also not the most clicked button. I think actually when I looked into some data, it was 3% of users that actually click on the more information button of those that are coming. So just to put it a little bit into relation, but it's important that you have this option. It's important that you're providing this information. How can you use cookie banners in a user-friendly way? You have seen here one example of a cookie banner that we are using, and I will explain you later on in terms of user-friendliness, which KPIs it would be optimized for, because we do have two different KPIs in terms of marketing that I'm looking at when I look at cookie banners. It's on the one hand acceptance rate, on the other hand bounce rate. Acceptance rate means of all the visitors that are entering the website, how many of them are accepting the use of cookies. And the average value here on the market is lying at around 40 to 50%. But that depends, and you can optimize that depending on the design of cookie banner that you are choosing. Then on the other hand, we do have the bounce rate. The bounce rate means how many visitors are so shocked by the cookie banner or turned off by the cookie banner that they say, okay, I rather leave the website instead of accepting or rejecting cookies. I just don't want to deal with this. Bye. And the bounce rate as well, of course, is affected by the design of cookie banner that is chosen, by the size of it, etc. And I will explain that with practical examples on the next slide. I think very important here is to understand what do I want to optimize for as a marketeer, because it's impossible to optimize for both of those KPIs at once. If I want to have a very, very high acceptance rate, because for me it's more important to collect all the data possible, and the data enables me to sell better, to improve the performance of my website, to give a better user experience, maybe I might choose one that is benefiting a high acceptance rate. If it's more important for me that users don't bounce, if it's something critical, if it's something that I'm noticing with the use of a cookie banner, suddenly my bounce rate went up way too much, way more than I'm comfortable with, and I rather want to have a usability, a UX design, which results in a higher, in a lower bounce rate, and might have therefore also a lower acceptance rate, then this is something that requires a different design. And I will show you now 2 examples that we found on the web. We just took the screenshots this week. On the one hand here, you have on the left an example from ITV, and on the right, you have an example from the EasyJet website. And you have 2 different cookie banners here. I would say the ITV one is more in line with what we are going for. We are being a data protection website. In our case, we don't fear that the cookie banner might be a turn off and might affect a high bounce rate, because in a way, we are assuming people are visiting us because data protection is something that they're looking for. It's a solution that they're looking for. And it's important to us to showcase we are taking data protection, of course, being a service provider, very seriously. And you have the choice and you have the cookie banner here. And it's very big and it's basically covering part of the website. In the ITV case, it's even more drastic, where you can see it even darkens the background and covers then a big part of the website. Something that we can see here is what Lisa and I already mentioned. Again, here I don't have an option to just easily opt out. I can agree, and then I can go to some other page that allows me to get information on how do I change cookie settings, but I don't have an option to say, hey, I'll opt out here. I don't want cookies, but I want to continue browsing your website, right? So I assume that should increase the bounce rate even more, because me as a user, if I want to sorry about that. If I want to opt out from cookies, I don't have this option. My only option here seems to be I'm leaving the website. So what we can see here, in general, the acceptance rate of cookies will be probably higher because it's very, very visible. I do have to interact with the cookie banner if I want to continue browsing the website, but the bounce rate will very likely also be higher in this case. On the right-hand side with EasyJet, I do have a cookie banner that you probably have seen a lot, and a lot more in the past. They start to get a bit less, at least on popular websites, but we still see them. It's like the small cookie banner in the bottom, the one that Lisa mentioned earlier, used to just inform. By surfing on our website, you are agreeing that we are utilizing tracking cookies, and done. At least this one here got a button that says, okay, got it. But also there is no mechanism about accepting, about declining. You could have basically this design with an accept and decline button. They exist. I assume if I don't agree to okay, got it, EasyJet hopefully doesn't set cookies. I didn't check that yesterday, to be fair. I hope they don't set cookies because that would be definitely highly illegal and GDPR standards. But even if it's required, if they don't set the cookies, the acceptance rate is probably lower. It doesn't really hinder me, right? It's like one of those banners that is opening up. There's some other banners that are opening up with some notifications in the top. I can just continue browsing the website without being bothered by that, and therefore the acceptance rate of cookies is probably quite low here, but the bounce rate also, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't put me off, it's not really a reason to leave the website, but also very, very likely, not very likely, this one is not compliant. No, based on the standards that we have just basically elaborated in the webinar, neither one of those options that we can see here are compliant. There is other websites, there are great examples. I have surfed a few UK newspapers yesterday, and I was very, very impressed because they have implemented already the new regulations. They do have cookie banners that give the option to choose, which cookies I want to accept, and that are very similar in terms of the information content of what we have seen right now. It was our example. So they are compliant. I see a change there, Lisa, I have to say, at least definitely now that I did the research for the UK, and we have done the German webinar 2-3 months ago, quite a bit closer to the ruling. When I did the research there, I've seen way more websites that were definitely not compliant. So I've seen a change, I would say, with the top popular websites. So the one probably also will have a risk of a very, very high fine. But I also see that there's still shockingly a lot of websites that haven't adapted to the new regulation yet, and that should very, very fastly do so. Is there anything you want to add at this point, Lisa? I'm sorry, I've been running like a machine.
You explained You explained it perfectly.
Perfect, thank you. All right, Lisa, do you want to tell something about Pridatect?
Oh yes, I do. No, in fact, here in Pridatect, we have like a great legal team, a great platform which can help you with the cookie consent we just spoke about now. This is one of our main businesses, checking your homepage, your website, if it's cookie compliant, what you need to adjust, what you need to do. And this is what we're talking about here, mostly like identifying the risks in time. Right now, the risk is really high, the risk to get fined. So we have to identify the risks, and in the processing of personal data, we have to look here, especially at the Schrems decision, how it impacts your cookie processes, but also all the other data security risks, of course. There's a lot of things to do. We will speak in the next slide about it. Then we need to define and recommend measures. What can we do to mitigate those risks? Of course, and monitoring and implementation of data protection is really important, because as I always said, data protection is not a one-time thing. Think like 10 years back, maybe then your cookie consent was perfectly fine because the legal requirements were like this, but things changed. Things will change, hopefully, with the e-privacy regulation. It will get even more intense. So like to keep up to date with all these new regulations, it's a bit difficult, and this is why Pridatect is there for you and to do the work for you. Even like if you're a small business, you can be always 100% compliant.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. And also maybe to add at this point, we're working with clients from all over Europe. We do have quite a lot of clients from the UK, from other difficult data protection markets like Germany, and also from Southern Europe and from Central Europe. What is very important here, we know Brexit is coming up. It's one of the topics. We have covered that in a webinar earlier this year. We are going to do a new and updated webinar about this. I don't want to lie, I think in 2 weeks. But please stay tuned. We will definitely inform via email webinar participants who might be interested in that. Important here is that we want to mention is there is topics coming up about having UK representatives, about having EU representatives in terms of data protection, depending on the data that you are treating. Please feel free to contact us if this is something you're worried about after Brexit. We are very happy to help with that. We're also providing the services ourselves, but even if you just want to know how it works and what you need, it's definitely something you can feel free to reach out to us with your data protection concerns.
Absolutely. And as I was mentioning before, it's of course not only cookies Pridatect takes care about, but we conduct risk assessments. What is really important as well, checking your technical organizational measures to see, of course, you have enough measures to mitigate the risk in your company. What every company needs to do is a register of processing activities. What we will, of course, work together on with you, that you have it established correctly for the authorities. Then speaking about cookie consent, we also have to speak about a general website compliance. So not, of course, like the privacy policies, terms and conditions, what we check with you. Then we have our external DPO service, which we offer. So of course, if your company needs a DPO, we can be this person for you, or as Xenia mentioned, also the EU representative, new what we have. And yes, this is just like you have here the long list of everything we are doing, and we are happy to make every company GDPR compliant and just like secure in every regard of data protection.
Perfect. Yeah, I just saw that one point that was missing here is our new e-learning platform that we have recently added to the services, and we haven't added to the slide yet. I'm sorry about that. That's a failure on marketing side here. What I wanted to mention there is that we do have an e-learning platform, because one of the important parts of a data protection program is that employees are informed. One of your highest risk group for data breaches are your own employees. So it's really, really important that they are being trained and that they have access to the material information that they need for their work in terms of data protection. So we have this e-learning platform. Our clients can use it. They have access for each and every employee there in different courses by departments, so that they can ensure that everybody in the company is informed how to not make a mistake and how to treat data safely.
Exactly. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure, sure. This one I can do also very quickly. And so basically just what we wanted to say, in case you're interested, in case you would like to know how Pridatect could help your company with data privacy and how we can help you to navigate the difficulties of GDPR and also UK data privacy laws, please feel free to book a demo or just take a 7-day trial of our software or contact us with any of the questions that you're having. We're there for you for all your data privacy regards.
Exactly.
Perfect. So question part, so one of our favorite parts of every webinar, and I've seen a few came in. I think, Lisa, you already had a look as well. Do you want to start?
Exactly. And the first one I would shoot right at you because it's like a marketing question.
Okay.
Is the marketing agency responsible if cookie banners are not GDPR compliant?
Ooh, that would be an easy one. I wish it was like that as a marketeer. No, of course not. I like my marketing agency. No, marketing agency is a service provider. They can give you a recommendation maybe, and you can be lucky enough if they have some kind of idea about it. I would not trust marketing agencies in general with GDPR regards, just because they are not specialists, not professionals that deal with that in their day-to-day work. So it's definitely something, if I do have a doubt, I'm asking Lisa. I would never ask our marketing agency about that. And definitely I cannot expect them to hold the responsibility. The responsibility for whatever your company is doing is on your side. It's not this on the side of a service provider like your marketing agency.
Absolutely. Then we had one, I think you already answered, if we will be sharing the presentation, so nobody had to take notes. Of course, we will be sharing it. Then, is it possible to create a website without cookies? So I can answer this question very well because we just have a client like this before. I thought it is not possible because I've honestly never seen one website without cookies, not one before. But then we had like our role model customer who decided to have like a cookie-free website, and I saw it works. He has it. It is working. You can also try it by yourself, like turning off all the cookies in the web browser, and most of the websites is still working. But a lot of people still use cookies, of course, because they're just so helpful. In many cases, cookies allow us to improve the functionality of the site, and websites can adapt to the user. This is just like very comfortable for all of us. So if the website comes in the language you have previously visited, or if items remain in the shopping cart, I think this is beneficial for both parties. So yes, you can create a website, of course, without cookies. But yeah, there are many reasons to have cookies also on the website, I would say, no?
They can be useful. I mean, cookies are not just something bad, no? Cookies are not only there for evil marketeers to track user behavior, but it's also something useful that helps us to provide a better user experience, to provide certain contents that require cookies, to make it easier for you when you're visiting a website again. If you're visiting a website and you're constantly filling out forms, you probably know it yourself how annoying it is if you're going to the same website again and again, and some that are not particularly intelligent will ask you to fill out the same information again and again, and the cookie can really just help there to make your life easier. So cookies are not being used just as a mean data collection mechanism, but they're also very often just something that should make the user's life easier.
Exactly. So then we have another one. Occasionally I see statements that if you continue to use a website, you are providing consent to the use of cookies. This isn't active consent, however, so it's sufficient. No, absolutely not. It's not sufficient, as we mentioned before, and as you mentioned in the question already. It's not active consent, so definitely not valid, this type of consent.
I think it was actually the EasyJet example, if I'm not completely wrong, and it's been a bit of a shocker to me. But yeah, and unfortunately, sometimes you still find those around, and I would say this is the most horrible case. If I see that, that's super bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So then another question: the banner on mobile devices is often so big that it covers the whole screen, and you cannot do nothing other to accept. Is this legal?
Yeah, okay. The legal part Lisa can respond to, but one thing that I can definitely say there, please feel free. I didn't do a screenshot of our mobile version, but you can check pridatect.co.uk on your mobile phone, and you will see it's completely possible to implement on mobile a cookie banner that makes it possible to use the buttons. There's really not an excuse why you shouldn't be able to do that. You've seen like there's the layer approach where you have less information on the first layer, and I really don't understand. I think really it's a bit more of a lazy excuse, but there is enough cookie banner providers that offer you a responsive solution. In 2020, we should be able to make our websites responsive and also to have responsive cookie banners.
Absolutely. And another question, do you expect a wave of cease and desist letters after this ruling? So I think the ruling is the ruling of the European Court of Justice meant by this, of the Planet 49. I would say this depends also a bit on the authorities in question. So the ICO in general is very supportive with everyone, but it depends also a lot on the competition. And normally they say that in crisis, those cease and desist letters are even higher, and you wonder like, why don't the people have other problems? But now they have to really fight for every client. You have to fight for every customer because you need them, and this is where the competitors maybe talk to the authorities, say, look at those cookie banners, they are not doing it right. Everybody does what they can to survive, and then this is why the numbers go up in this case. So it's far possible that there will be some fines out there.
Absolutely. And also maybe to understand the topic of fines, because it's a question we get quite a lot at Pridatect, it's the topic of what do I have to expect? Can I be fined for that? How likely is it that I get a fine for that? It's a very difficult question, but something that I like to explain there is, how do fines work? Why does a company get a letter usually from a data protection authority? Who initiates that? Usually it's your users, your clients, or your competitors that have a look at what you're doing. They notice something that is not okay, and they are basically sending a letter to an email to the data protection authorities and saying, hey, have a look at that. That seems to me to be out of line of data privacy regulations. And the more letters that are entering, the more important the case starts to become, and then the data protection authority looks into your company and looks into what you are doing. Of course, what we noticed is when 2018 GDPR came into action, the first ones that were looked at were very large organizations, because they got the most complaints, and we had a lack of resources on the side of data protection organizations, like the ICO in the UK. Sorry, the ICO in the UK. But the thing is, that changed. So by 2020, we have more people working for the ICO, we have more resources on their side, and they started also moving down the ladder from large enterprise organization to mid-sized businesses, and sometimes also very small businesses. It depends how bad the complaints are. We had quite a few cases that the ICO opened this year in terms of unlawful marketing practices, unsolicited emails, unsolicited calls. Of course, where does this come from? These are leads or clients that are complaining there. But the same topic will be with the cookie banners. And what we see there is also a delay. So usually the cases that I have seen this year on the ICO page that were open, those were companies that did mistakes in 2018 and are now starting a process where now the ICO starts a process against them. So it's claims from 2018. So it means if you are receiving claims in 2020, you might be seemingly fine for now, and seemingly there might be no cases for cookie banners yet. That doesn't mean that in 22, the ICO didn't get around to those cases as well and starts making it a topic. So it's really important to take care promptly as possibly about it, and to ensure, even if a case starts to be open, that the ICO or any other data protection authority sees that you have taken reaction, that you have taken measure, that you have taken the topic seriously, and that you are working on your data protection program. That is the part that we can always say, and that's the best way to just prevent a fine and also react in case of a data authority claim. Anything you want to add to that, Lisa?
No, already stated my point. No, absolutely, you're completely right. Then we have another one, and this is, which tools can you recommend for managing cookies on our website? So we are very happy to help with the selection of a provider, but this depends very on the individual company. So this needs to be evaluated, of course, together with us. We cannot say here, hey, choose this provider, because they adapt to different needs of different clients, of course. So you can contact us after the webinar, and this is we can evaluate together, of course. But there are some good out there who take really a lot of work from you in regards of setting the cookies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It starts to get late. We took already quite a while. It was a long webinar. We will check if we have missed any of the questions that you have been asking us, or if there's anything that is left open, and we will get back to you by email, no worries. And if there's anything in the future that's popping up or after the webinar, you have the email address here. Please feel free to contact us. I just want to say thank you so much to everybody for joining us today, and we hope that it was useful and that you feel a bit more comfortable about navigating the topic of cookies and cookie banners on your website.
Exactly. Thank you very much for joining.